is to inspire you to continue with our mission of encouraging the city to continue to foster the growth of more trails and more networks in our city. And I'm just thinking, you know, there are so many ways in which our trails can feel problematic. If it's trash and graffiti, it can make it feel like, you know, maybe I don't want to use the trail. It's groups like us. It's volunteers who come together to do trail cleanups in the spring. And right now, we need to sort of think ahead of who's going to come together and help us. It's only like 3 people or 2 people who make a cleanup happen. Or if you think about in the winter, the trail doesn't help you bicycle to work if it isn't plowed. And how do we mobilize to make sure that it gets plowed? It's when the community comes together and asks the city to put the resources together to get it plowed. And it takes a group like us to come together and say, this is important, this is a priority. So what are the other problems that the trails can have? You know, it just seems like there are parts of Florence or Leeds where the trails really don't seem to be all that important because they don't link that part of Northampton to other places where you need to get to. Well, it's communities, groups like this one that put a request to the city that says it's a priority for us to make sure that the trail networks really connect where people live to where people want to go. So for all the things that you might grumble about the trails, please help the Friends of Northampton Trails and Greenways find the solutions to make things work. And on that note, I'm really pleased to turn it over to Judy, who is going to do the next part.
I'm Judy Cardell, and I'm also on the board of Friends of Northampton Trails and Greenways, but I'm with Julia and Nick do most of the work. And one of the things we did do this year, which I was part of, most I saw like picking up was the map from in the back. And I live here in Florence, and I cycle all up off of the roads and stuff too. So we're thinking of expanding the map this year, trying to get some of the roads that people also bike on, the roads, and also then showing the connection up to the Manhattan. So we're going to try to expand the map, make the whole piece of paper that it's on bigger. We did this last spring and printed 5,000 copies, and we're running out. So this is a little bit of a plug. If anyone knows anyone who would like to have a little ad here, which is $150, but just keep that in mind, and it's 5,000 copies. Do I need to do more this time around?
10,000.
10,000, we're going to keep this. So just keep this in mind, and if anyone wants to, and people seem to be perfectly happy to sponsor that, but if anyone wants to, we'd love to also include more and more community small businesses in here, and we'll probably have them sort of around the map this coming year, so the map will be a little bigger. And then there's the website here, and there's a Yahoo email group to sort of stay in touch with you aren't involved with that. So what I am going to be doing now officially is handing out the award for the good neighbor of the trail. I forget the Friends of the Trail Neighbor Award. That's going this year to Kathleen and Craig Delapenna, who have a Sugar Maple Trail site name. And so for a lot of behind the scenes things that you don't see, a lot of trail maintenance and picking up trash and keeping things cleared. Sort of a busy intersection there, Chestnut Street and the trail, and I live on Chestnut Street, so I appreciate it every time I turn onto the trail and it's all cleaned up. You know, providing the display with the brochures and with our maps and a lot of information about the trail, and just advocacy behind the scenes for maintenance, a lot of within Craig's line of work with real estate. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work, and then also the visible stuff, having fixed up the trail, making that just a beautiful corner, a nice part of the trail, and providing literature. So for that, here's the award that we have with the little logo. And this is so last year went to the 6 to 8 high streets, people as you bike or walk past the bench. And so this year as you go past the inn and the display, think about what you'll do if you live on the trail.
Well, thank you very much, Judy, and certainly Kathleen and Craig for all that you really do. That's really just a key part of things. It is not the case that only people in Florence can win the Trail Neighbor Award. So keep those nominations coming. We look forward to it. Again, we're really excited. Again, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things behind the scenes. But I think the person who's really been instrumental in really making this trail network happen, and then tying in with some of the other things that are happening more regionally and statewide, is our own Wayne Feiden, who's the director of the Office of Planning and Development. And again, I think Wayne, started on this venture of trying to create these trails, thinking it was going to be a relatively short-term kind of proposition. And I love whenever I talk to Wayne, because Wayne seems to have a 6-month plan, a 3-year plan, a 10-year plan, and a 25-year plan. And they're all exciting projects that I think are really ways that you can actually make investments in designing a city to make it work better for the people who are there, to make it work for all the people who are there. And that's what really excites me about the work that Wayne does. And it's hard for me because I focus on the rail trail aspect of this, and I realize Wayne has other responsibilities that go beyond that. But again, quite appreciative of all the work that's been happening, a lot of it coming from City Hall. Again, I would really urge you all, just kind of ways you can stay involved. One is by letting your city councilor and the mayor and other, elected officials know how important it is that we continue to make these investments. A lot of the funding that's happening for these paths actually comes from state and federal transportation dollars, but they really start first. They have to get into that hopper. They have to be completely designed. And those funds fall predominantly on the city. The city's made big investments in this area. We've been able to take some of your contributions to help give Wayne and the city some of the flexibility to do this design work, but it's been relatively small contributions. The city has actually marshaled those other efforts, and again, we're really appreciative to Wayne of all the things he's doing, and again, thinking about ways to broaden, increase those efforts. So without further ado, let me introduce Wayne now to speak to us tonight about
I'm just going to talk through the 20-year plan. So depending on how you look at it, either I'm going to present 17 different projects for you, or one project. Because obviously the idea is to create one seamless network. And so when you go around town, you're going to see some places where we have sort of what we call orphan trails. Trails that look like they make no sense, like why do we have a trail that goes from Ice Pond to Florence Road and doesn't go anywhere? And it's because we have this 20-year plan. You get to see from where you are and where should all the trails be in the city. If the goal is before I retire that 80% of our residents are within half a mile of a rail trail, what are the steps to get there? And so we have a plan for what we want to do, and then we take advantage of opportunities to get there. I also give you a warning up front. You've already heard from people how you all can help in the process. So I will do an unabashed talking about sort of how contributions help make all this happen and where we get stuck in some of these projects. Because there has been, the federal government's paying 90% of the cost of rail trail improvements, state government's paying 10%. As Nick said, for the most part, the city's paying the design, the city's paying the acquisition. We've gotten some grants in those areas. We've gotten incredibly generous donations from the community, but things always come up. And so, I'll tell you the story of my life for the last 6 months. And I have to say this is more about my naivete than about any problems. But I've been working on this rail trail through from State Hospital downtown, and from downtown to Stop and Shop for 10 years. And I thought, okay, I finished the land acquisition. I finished the design, got Mass Highway to agree to fund it, and last year went out to bid. And so I said, okay, great, I'm done. And then Mass Highway sort of reminded me that we're overseeing $5.5 million of construction, and like any other project, somebody has to be there as the stuff comes up. And in that, so about a third of my time for the last 6 months has been managing the day-to-day of this $5.5 million of construction. And some of that is every so often stuff comes up. So the bridge across Main Street, which some of you thought might be in place by now, well, it turns out that granite walls aren't vertical on the inside of the wall. Now, I would have thought that was pretty obvious, but I guess to our engineer it wasn't. And so our engineer design said the granite wall that's on the outside is vertical. It must be vertical behind all that soil. And so they said, okay, we're going to put a concrete wall just inside the granite wall. I'm not going to go into details. And the concrete wall is going to hold the bridge. And it had to do with legal liability with the railroad. The railroad wouldn't let a railroad bridge rest on the granite, because they didn't want a railroad bridge in the same granite that holds up the railroad. So we design this thing, it's built, they start digging into the ground to pour the footings, and oddly enough, they pull back the soil, and the granite slopes inward. And the problem is the bridge has already been built. The bridge is in someone's backyard somewhere, and it's already been built, and so it's 2 inches too short. So we have to pay $2,000, and maybe we're going to sue our engineer who might have been incompetent. I don't know, but we have to pay for someone to go in and chip away 2 inches of concrete or granite so they can do the wall. And in the meantime, we have some costs involved in that. We're now paying $250 a month to store a bridge in someone's backyard. So if anyone wants to contribute $250 to store the bridge for the month of November, those are the kinds of things that we're looking for. We're also, just so you know where we're going, so we have lots of these things that come up, and and there's also the political side of the reason we look for money, is that first we have one extremely generous donor who gives us $5,000 a year if we can match it. So for the first $5,000, that's usually been our target, to raise $10,000 a year, 5 from general community, 5 from this donor. And that's not only $10,000 that helps with chipping away granite, but it's been great when I go to City Council. City Council and the CPA have both been incredibly generous in the process. But obviously there's a political statement to say, we are probably the only community in the Commonwealth who paid for a push-button signal, this opposite Stop and Shop, with contributions. And Nick and Trails and Greenways was incredibly helpful to do that fundraising, to do the design for the pedestrian signal at Stop and Shop. Grant money to actually build it itself. So that political leverage has been incredibly useful. And we're also, just my last shameless pitch, we're also just beginning to say, okay, the city, as you all know, we have a lot of constraints. How do we make sure that we can take care of these things forever in the future? And so we've started a process of creating an endowment fund. The endowment fund will be outside the city would not hold the funds. The idea is to make sure that they're beyond politics. Nobody can ever grab those funds, but 5% per year of the funds get turned over to the city, so we can make sure we do this forever in the future. So that's sort of all the background. Just very quickly, and all the slides you're seeing are zoom into this map as they go through the project. But very quickly, because you're going to see the same map over and over again. So I orient you. This is downtown. This is Florence. This is Leeds. From a bike path standpoint, that's the same Watertook Rail Trail that crosses the river. This is the Northampton bike path that we've had for years and years. So that's sort of the base. Where we started this project 25 years ago was, wouldn't it be great to build a bike path through here? I wasn't here, I don't get any credit for it. DPW, Board of Public Works were really the visionaries and were among the first bike paths in the state. The state then started this process, and we started saying, okay, we don't just want bike paths for recreation, which is originally the vision. We want bike paths that are good for recreation and to tie the community together. Just the way the roads do and the sidewalks, how we have one continuous network. And so the work we've been doing really for the last 10 years has been thinking about where are all the railroad corridors, because they've been abandoned. That's why we call these rail trails. It's really obvious to put these things back on the railroad. So most of the work has been where are the railroads that are no longer used, and it's State Rail Trail, City Rail Trail, Expansion City Rail Trail, and trail to East Hampton. And so that's a lot of work because it's sort of low-hanging fruit. Yes, these projects are millions of dollars, but it's still relatively simple because railroads are really flat and so you don't have to deal with grade. And all the rights-of-way are owned by 1 or 2 parties, so the rights-of-way are easy. And we're fortunate that most of the people in Northampton, the vast majority of our population, lives within a mile of one of these corridors. So if we build it, they do actually come because they're right there. The problem is if you live in a house that was built after World War II, you may not live within a mile of it. And my daughter's 12, if you have a kid below a certain age, a mile may be too far to get to the trail. So that's why we begin to think about, okay, is half mile the right number? I don't know, that's what we've been working towards. How do we get bike paths and rail trails within half a mile where everybody lives, where 80% of the population lives in town? Because the person who chooses to live on a mountaintop with dramatic views in the middle of the country, that's great, but we're not going to serve them with a bike path. So what I'm taking you through is sort of all the projects that we're working on. And I'm going to try to give us credit only for what we're involved with and not what other people are involved with. So the first one is, as you know, the State Rail Trail ended at Damon Road. It was built now, someone can correct me, 14 years? 93? Okay, so 15 years ago. And they did the extension in Northampton at the edge of the industrial park just last year. Our role in that process was relatively small. We were a cheerleader for it, and we took care of all the permits. There was at one point, the state's parks agency said, oh, Mass Highway should take care of the permits, and Mass Highway said, no, we think the state parks agency should take care of it. And the city, again, with all your contributions, said, okay, we'll take care of the permits to get this process moving. The part that we're now involved with is thinking, again, if we want to reach everyone's neighborhood, we don't want to just have a couple of access points to trails. So we're looking at, particularly that section between Bates, or Industrial Drive, as some may think of it, and Woodmont, and all those roads that almost come up to the bike path, but not quite. Can we hook into those roads? One of our goals is to avoid the problem we have on Damon Road, where everybody puts their bicycle on their car and drives the bike path. And it's a great, I may do that, it's a great way to go bicycling. But it's not really sustainable if we want people are driving to the path. It's clearly not something you're going to do on the way to work. So how do we get it to come out in as many neighborhoods as possible? So we're looking at Woodmont, for example. We had a small townhouse project, 3 units a couple years ago. As a condition of that project, we collected, I think it was $15,000, and said, to mitigate your traffic, we want you to hook, to expand Woodmont into the state rail trail. And now we're beginning to see if the state will actually give us permission. They may not. And that's, again, the area in terms of a political standpoint, we'd love your help, because we want the Parks Agency, State's Department of Conservation and Recreation, to share our vision that every street intersection should be an on-ramp and off-ramp. So that's the one we're working on right there, fairly straightforward, and hopefully you'll see that within a year or two. The big news this year, obviously, is our $5 million of bike paths that are in construction. So let me start with sort of talking about where they are. So this is, again, here's downtown right here. This solid red line is the Nagel Walkway. We've had that for 10 or 12, 15 years, whatever it's been. Nice walkway through downtown, dramatically underutilized. You can tell how underutilized it is from the amount of vandalism we've had. Because there's not people to watch people out there. We used to have a group who came, did cleanups, student volunteers, and we ended up finding enough problematic things, needles in one case, where we didn't feel comfortable having small kids help us do a cleanup, because needles are not a good thing. And a lot of that is, wherever you shine a light, things are fairly safe. And when you don't shine a light and it's dark, that's where you're more likely to have problems. So, the Nagel Walkway hasn't been as successful as we'd like, because there's not enough use that's out there. So the idea that we're working on this year is basically, how do we connect the state hospital all the way up to this existing bike path at Stop and Shop? 2 different projects that are back to back that are both being constructed this year. So the first one is this Manhattan Rail Trail from Earl Grove to basically underneath the New South Street Bridge. It's about 1 mile long, fairly straightforward with 2 very complicated sections. One complicated section is just the bridge across the Mill River. Absolutely spectacular railroad bridge has been fenced off for many, many years. Bridge covered with lead paint, which is a big problem. Some rare species, a rare mollusk in the river below, some rare butterflies on the banks nearby. And so we had to deal with, how do we deal with the bridge, how do we deal with lead paint, how do we deal with the mollusks, how do we deal with the butterflies. The other complications were Earl and Grove came together, and very difficult intersection right there. And so we had to straighten out that intersection, make it a safe 4-way intersection. That project is about 90% complete. There's still some details that are going to happen in the spring in terms of final landscaping. Last time I was out there a week ago, the binder coat of asphalt was down, the first 1.5 inches. They hadn't put the final coat of asphalt down. My understanding is they're going to try to do it before the asphalt plant's closed, and I'm not sure the answer. So it's not really going to matter for most of you. If you see an 1.5 inch lip, it's not because we're stupid and didn't know about the 1.5 inches. It's because the asphalt gets poured in 2 different coats. So it's, again, it's going to look done with some minor things that are left for the spring. We're also dealing with these complications I talked about. All that stuff behind Earl Grove, that abutment's right there, We did a hazardous waste investigation. We found some stuff that's out there. We did a few sample borings trying to figure out how much bad stuff is there. They started removing it, and there's a lot more bad stuff than we thought. If you go along the trail, you're going to see an enormous berm covered with plastic. Don't touch it. And so that's all being trucked out. But the difference between disposing of fill at a landfill, where you might be paying, $10 a yard tipping, and disposing of it as hazardous waste, where you're paying $50 a yard, is real money when you're dealing with 12,000 yards of material. And so that's been the biggest challenge. But as I say, that project is almost done and will look completely done within a week or so. And then in the spring, you'll see a little more work going on. And that's about a $2.2 million project. The project through downtown is in some ways a lot more exciting and in all ways a lot more consuming for my time. Because the nature of downtown is every inch counts. So, for example, you have to stay 9 feet away from an active railroad line. Well, we unfortunately had 8 feet from an active railroad line. And there's one place where we had an active railroad line on one side and power poles on the other side, and no place to move the railroad line, and no place to move the power poles. And we didn't think we could narrow the trail down to 2 feet wide. And ownership information that goes back 150 years, so it's not totally clear where everybody owns things. So it's been a real challenge. It's making enormous progress. The other little challenge, the reason I took this picture is, any of you know the parking lot off Old South Street? If you've been here forever, you may know that when this was an active railroad, there was a tunnel underneath that to go from one side to the other. Well, unfortunately, I didn't know that, and my engineer didn't know that. So they're working along in the grade, and suddenly right here, they hit the granite top of this huge tunnel that's there. So if you come here later and drop a marble, the marble will go this way a little bit and this way a little bit. It's not they didn't know the hump was there. We're not trying to have your kids have a speed hump. It's that we changed the grade of the trail about 2 inches so we could go over this tunnel. So we didn't have to fill in the entire tunnel and collapse the entire tunnel. So it's making a lot of progress. The big challenge, we just don't know what's going to happen, is they've been spending the last 3 weeks pouring concrete at Main Street and North Street for the bridges. That's the real challenge. We need new bridges across the street. We have to go behind that granite wall that I mentioned before. We want the bridges high enough that if a truck hits the bridges again, they're not hitting our brand new bridges. Because our brand new bridges are very light and they come on a truck and they will be severely damaged by a truck hitting them. So our bridges have to be higher than the old railroad bridges that's there. In order to put those bridges in, we'll be closing Main Street and North Street for 5 hours, and the crane will be right in the middle of the street moving these bridges. We have to de-energize all the power lines, and we'd like it to happen in 2 weeks. We're still dealing with National Grid. Don't pay your electric bills this month, we're mad at them. And so we don't know when it's going to happen. Our contract will be ready 2 weeks from now. This, again, in terms of those unforeseen costs. We may have to pay for our contractor to leave and come back a month later, depending on where we can get National Grid to do what we'd like National Grid to do. But just so you know, all these things are hiccups in the path, and these are all going forward. Come June and July, you will have a bike path that you can use through there, or maybe September, but next summer this bike path will be done. At some point this winter, we can get the bridges in. The bridges are built, as I say, we're paying $250 a month to store them. ServiceNet has been one of our heroes in this process because we need to get access to the path, and ServiceNet has let us go through their property. We right now will not have an off-ramp at North Street, but ServiceNet has been working with us, and we'll probably eventually be able to do an off-ramp through, this is the old Armory site, an off-ramp through their property somewhere down the line. That's a future project. So we're making good progress on that. So these two things, the first one will look done this year, and will be totally done next July. This project lags behind a little bit more, but by the end of next summer, it should be completely done. The other project, which is finally done, is what I said looks like an orphan. From Ice Pond Drive to Florence Road, we have a short bike path through there. If you look at Ice Pond, the sidewalks on the west side, the left side of Ice Pond, are wider than most sidewalks. And that's for kids who want to go on the bike path. That's to give them a place to ride. We assume adults are happy riding the road. Kids who want to ride in these wider sidewalks. So you go to an ice pond from, basically you go by the jail on Route 66, just past the jail, you make the next right if you're leaving Northampton. You go through this 900-foot long subdivision road. The sidewalk on the left is the one that's wider. At the end of the 900-foot subdivision road is a little cul-de-sac. You can park your car there, hopefully your bicycle there, and you can take this really nice bike path. It crosses a wetlands. We are experimenting with ways to get bike paths through wetlands in ways that our Conservation Commission likes, that are lower maintenance. And so even though the bike path is 8 feet wide, we're actually using 4-foot wide aluminum docks. Because they can be high enough up that the sunlight can go underneath the docks, and so we're not affecting the wildlife there. We're not getting, if any of you go to Barrett Street Marsh, one of our earlier docks, we have erosion underneath the boardwalk because the sunlight can't get in, so plants don't grow. So we have a big rainstorm, it washes away the soil. So we're trying to avoid that problem. We think we've got a good solution here. Plus the aluminum is basically maintenance free. So it goes through that. Pathways Co-Housing was incredibly generous and gave us a right-of-way through their property. Then it goes through Rocky Hill Co-Housing. They were generous, but theirs was a condition of a permit, so they get less credit. And then it comes out on Florence Road. And eventually, I'll talk about this more later, eventually it's going to connect. The good news is last Thursday, the Commonwealth opened bids for extending the bike path from Bridge Road, where the current bike path ends, all the way up to Grove Avenue in Leeds. And so bids came in on Thursday. The Commonwealth is analyzing those bids to make sure that ET&L is the parent low bidder, really is the low bidder. They'll be awarding a contract sometime in December or January. ET&L will then mobilize over the winter, and we expect beginning in the spring, you begin to see that construction project. That's probably about a 16-month construction project. Let's see there. So that should be really beautiful. Part of the compromise we have is we're trying, right now, as you know, the Northampton Bike Path, which is no longer its name in Snelling, I'll come back to that later. The Northampton Bike Path is plowed during the winter. Both DPW and the mayor would really like to plow that forever, and both would like to extend it elsewhere, plowing all our paths. It's very expensive, and so there's challenges of how can we afford to do that. But at least we're trying to design these rail trails so that's possible. Our priority for where we plow is things which help kids on their journey to school. It costs us $150 per day to run a school bus. So you can guess, if we can cut out one school bus run, $150 per day, that's an awful lot of savings. So our priority for, this is true for sidewalks as well in the city, but our priority for both bike path plowing and sidewalk delivery is, can we make the journey to work, to school safer for kids who are walking anyway, and get some kids who are in the buses to walk and change some of the bus routes. So that's one of the things we're trying to do here. On the other hand, north of Florence Road, there's a lot of opposition to a trail because they sort of say, well, we've been using this trail for 50 years. We don't want more people here. We don't want it to be paved. And so the compromise is we're doing a paved trail up to Florence Road, or actually about
Florence Street.
Florence Street, I'm sorry. Up to Florence Street, where Florence Street becomes Mulberry. And then it's trap rock gravel north of that up to Grove Ave.
I'm sorry, wait, is that near where the dam?
Yes, the dam is in the trap rock gravel section.
Okay, and that's like about 50 feet after that transition point?
Right, so right north of Florence Street is that building on the left, the old awning shop. We're going to be paved going through that property.
Okay.
Then there's some big granite blocks that are back there. We switched to trap rock gravel. Shortly after the granite blocks is the Charkback Dam on the left that you're talking about. We go up maybe a quarter of a mile, and then we go up basically to the edge of where Grove Ave is. We go a tiny bit north, and then the trail ends, and it winds back. We're leaving the right-of-way, and it winds back to Grove Ave. So it will connect to the edge of Grove Ave. We own the right-of-way that goes further north. That's not part of this project. That's right. So again, paved where we think kids are bicycling, or could be bicycling either from Leeds to JFK, or from other sections in Leeds to Ryan Road Elementary School, and trap rock gravel north of that section. Other project that CPA just funded, we still have challenges for this, is how do you get from the Northampton bike path to Jackson Street Elementary School? If you're coming from Florence, you go to the street west of Jackson Street. But that's not the way most kids are coming. There's, more people coming from the whole neighborhood, going from Ward Avenue, all the way up to Prospect. And for a lot of them, coming the bike path is a logical way to go and a safer way to go. And if you go there in the morning, you see some people go across the bridge and feel uncomfortable on the bridge because they don't want to be in the bike path. Some people just scramble up the hill along the bridge. DPW, using community development block grant money, designed an off-ramp. CPA has given us money, CPA through the City Council has given us money to fund it. We're now negotiating with the property owner to get a right-of-way across it. National Grid, we're not worried about. There's a private property owner, and if you know them, you can help lobby us. So that's the big challenge now. So if we can acquire that land, we begin that construction in the spring. And this is consistent. There's a federal program, a Safe Routes to School program that's around the country. It's basically a pilot in Massachusetts. They took about a dozen elementary schools in Massachusetts and studied ways to make the journey to those schools safer. And they just issued the report in the last couple of days. And hopefully, if communities approve the report, there'd be federal money to actually build those changes. So the consultant looked at that, took this as a given, so we don't get money for that, and it's looking at a bunch of other changes to make it safer to walk to Jackson Street School as part of this pilot project. And so even though they're not including this ramp as part of it, they're including connections to the ramp. How do you get from the top of the ramp to Jackson Street School and make that safer? And some of them are tiny little things like the bridge across the bike path has fences, so you wouldn't throw rocks at trains when we went through there. But the fences date back to when there actually used to be trains below. And so they're in horrible shape and make the sidewalk feel narrower. Up to some more substantial things in terms of how to make the sidewalks wider. Because right now, if you see two kids walking on the sidewalk, some of them are right next to the asphalt. And I wouldn't want my 8-year-old kid to be walking right on the edge of the street where people drive 40 miles an hour. So the other one, this one we're actually not having to pay for ourselves. It's very nice. But it's part of the state hospital redevelopment. The developer of the state hospital is required to build a series of paths up to their property and through their property. So they own a total of 90 acres of land, and they're going to be building a total of about 1.5 miles of road and a total of 2.5 miles of trails. So an enormous network of trails. The main network, the main thing that will connect people from the Manhattan Rail Trail that we're building now in the state hospital will be a paved bike path. And then their network in places where we expect a lot of traffic will be paved, and places we expect less traffic will be gravel or rock gravel. And sort of based on the kind of traffic we get there. So that's going forward in phases. The build after that's probably still a couple years away, but it is moving forward. It's tied to all the permits for the project. The other one's a challenge is some of you know that cities have this really scary power called eminent domain, where we can buy land from somebody who doesn't want to sell it to us. We still have to pay them what it's worth, but we can buy land where someone doesn't want to sell it to us. We almost never use it. The only time we really use this for road widenings, usually road intersections, against people. But we're a little more willing to use that against utility companies. So National Grid has been sometimes a wonderful partner and sometimes a large bureaucracy where staff that would love to work with you, but we can't get our bosses to approve this. So most of our rail trails have been very friendly at the staff level. Couldn't hear anything from corporate. We would have a first vote for city council for eminent domain, and then corporate would say, we want to work with you. And so far all these deals have been wonderful. The problem with railroads, unfortunately, is railroads are creations of federal government, they're chartered by the federal government, and little governments can't take things from bigger governments. So we have no right of eminent domain against the railroad. So one of our big challenges, which is pretty obvious in this map, is you got the state rail trail, which now ends 100 feet from behind where Wendy's used to be, where Taco Bell is going to be. And we have the city bike path under construction, which will, when it's done, go from Leeds all the way to State Hospital, literally across the railroad tracks. And you can go up to Mass Highway's district office any morning of the week and look out the window and see all those people crossing the tracks illegally with their bike path. When we have bike paths on both sides, we know that's going to go off dramatically. So when the state was building a rail trail, the state approached Pan Am Railway, or what used to be Jeffrey Company, Springfield Terminal, and said, we'd like to buy a tunnel underneath the railroad. And the railroad said, no way we're going to do that. Too much liability. We're not going to allow that to happen. We then approached them about 2 years ago and said, we're really worried about your liability, because we care about you. And we got a bike path on one side, we got to have a bike path on the other side, and there's people, some Northampton residents are just evil people. And they're going to cross your tracks. Can you help us out? So we're now negotiating getting a tunnel. They are actually, we've been dealing, Pan Am is now the owner of it. Pan Am's actually been a pleasure to deal with. Still a large bureaucracy, but compared to Springfield Terminal, we're much more optimistic. We're making progress. Still a bureaucracy. I will say the only time in all the consulting fees we've had where I felt totally ripped off was they wouldn't even look at our plans without us paying them $5,000. Total outrage. We spent 6 months looking for people to put pressure on them, and finally there was no way around it. And so we had to pay their engineering time to review our plans so they could tell us what they liked and didn't like. And unfortunately, railroads get to do that. But again, we've been dealing with the downtown rail trail to run along our line, and I've been very happy with them. So all those horrible stories, I told about them before. Now I'm taking them back. So we'll see how that goes, but the goal is we do not have money for that. So when the state was doing the state rail trail, they did 100% design, although it wasn't really 100% design, it's maybe 80% design. They ignored things like groundwater and some other issues. But we're at least mostly done with the design. If the railroad agrees to sell us the right-of-way, we'll buy the right-of-way, we'll finish the design. But because this is such an unknown, we're not even in the queue for funding, for construction funding. Typically, absent a congressman or a senator giving us a lot of money, the queue is 5 to 10 years to build these things. Now, what we really like is Congressman Oliver, who's unfortunately not our congressman, but is on committees that have lots of money. He is the congressman over here and over here. And this will someday be the major break in the barrier connecting this district together. And he has been an amazing supporter of rail, both in the region and in Northampton, even though we're not part of this district. So we hope we can get money from that. Again, we haven't even asked yet because we need to get the railroad's approval. So it's moving forward. It's the one of the hardest to judge the time. And so the order of the slides is roughly the order I think these things will get done, but I could be wrong about something. So the next big project we're working on is to say we're going from State Hospital downtown right now. We'd like to go from State Hospital all the way down to Ferry Street in East Hampton. So we've been working on this jointly with East Hampton. Northampton and East Hampton originally applied for funds for design. We're the lead agency, but East Hampton's been a pleasure to work with on this project. It's about 1.5 miles in Northampton and 1 mile in East Hampton. We acquired the right-of-way from National Grid up to where those overhead power lines come in, and then we didn't go beyond that. And the reason, quite frankly, is this goes back to the eminent domain story. Where there's not overhead power lines, it's easy for us to figure out what's the land worth. We can do an appraisal. I can tell you it's about 50 cents per square foot. Lots of comps out there, easy to do. As soon as you get underneath the power lines, there's always the risk that they go to court and say, Your Honor, I have to move $10 million of power lines because they're building this rail trail here. And the judge will say, oh, yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. Northampton, can you give them $10 million to move their power lines? So, not surprisingly, we're not really comfortable doing adverse possession against National Grid underneath the power lines. We're comfortable with the trail being there. We just feel like we have to deal with them, and they are a slow bureaucracy. So, we sent them plans 3 years ago. They gave us all the concerns they had about 1.5 years ago. We sent them revised plans about 6 weeks after that. We're now waiting for them to review the final plans. About 3 months ago, they said, we're fine, we're set to go, we're willing to give it to you. We're waiting for the paperwork to actually come through.
The plan would build a trail there with the power lines there.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. And so that's the challenge. The biggest challenge, actually, where the trail's at grade, going to the power lines is pretty easy. And the reality is, if they want to move their power lines, 10 feet of asphalt is not that common. All the engineering and stuff is about the structures, the drainage structures, the bridges, that kind of stuff. The actual asphalt is pretty simple in this process. So where the power lines are there and where it grades is pretty simple. Where we have real challenges, we have to cross Manhattan Rail Trail and Bridge. Can't go up the bridge more than 5% grade, so it's a steep climb to get up that, and a steep climb to go down the other side. And there's some active power lines we have to deal with. We will have one spot, the Mass Highways approved this, where the trail will actually be a divided highway, and the power line will be right in the middle. One power pole will be right in the middle. Because we couldn't move the pole, we couldn't move the trail. It's just south of the Manhattan Bridge, and so it's a very constrained section. And then the other spot is crossing Route 10, East Hampton Road, where cars go 60 miles an hour. Again, a bridge has to be 17.5 feet above the road because we don't want to get hit by trucks. 17.5 feet above the road is the power lines, and so there's some real complications there. We've played with a couple of minor design alternatives. One approach we're probably not going to do is leaving the right-of-way, going along Route 10. There's a spot where the problem is where the railroad used to cross. It's not very good line of sight. There's another spot if we go about half a mile, maybe it's a quarter of a mile. We're on the crest of a hill, you can see a long way in both directions. And we've played with, should we put it there and do a signal, save $1 million, $1.5 million. And so, you know, something to look at as time goes forward. Other person, you know, this goes back to that orphan trail. So we have this, as you can see these red dots, we have a sort of vision on where do rail trails make sense overall as opportunities come up. And it's mostly places that are flat enough a trail would work, places where we're not tearing down homes, which is considered tacky, places where it's not wetlands, you know, ways we can do this. And then we get opportunities. So there's a subdivision that's mostly built out here called the Ridge, and as part of the mitigation for the Ridge, they built what's now a nice walking trail, because it doesn't go anywhere. But it was all, but the thinking is, someday this little walking trail from the Ridge will be a parallel route to Route 66 and bring people back. So the Ridge is this nice trap rock gravel trail. Traffic out there is low enough, we don't think there's any reason for it to be asphalt. So it's a trap rock gravel trail. There's another subdivision that's being proposed before the recent downturn. We thought the subdivisions come in any day now. You know, I mean, I want to tell one story. I worked for Northampton now 20 years and 2 days. And I think this project has been about to come in the entire time it's been. They submit it, and then it doesn't work, and 5 years later they submit it again. So you never quite know. When I met with them 4 months ago, they're absolutely ready to really submit it this time. But, you know, with the turn. But anyway, things have changed, I'm actually glad it didn't happen before. So they get that now if we're going to do this project, we need to continue this trail all the way to Glendale. We already own conservation land that goes beyond Glendale Road. We have the right to put a trail through there. So we're lining these rights up. We looked at alternatives. Park Hill Road has a lot less traffic than Route 66. We thought about this sort of, there's a section of Park Hill Road that's only passable with a Jeep. We can improve that for bicycles and then bring people up Park Hill Road is a much safer way to go. I will say when I talk about bike paths later, Mass Highway, some of you may know, is the new Mass Highway, or at least they give a lot of authority to each district. So if any of you heard me give a similar talk, I guess 10 years ago, I would have been very grumpy about Mass Highway. Mass Highway District 2 is our district. It's absolutely wonderful. It's a great director. It's been a good partner, at least in communities that want it. And so one of the things they're willing to do is, new Route 66, is have the travel lanes a foot or two narrower than they generally are, and have the shoulders a foot or two wider. So they may or may not be technically bike paths in terms of 5-foot lanes, but they will be wide painted shoulders that people will be comfortable to ride on. So that alone makes Route 66 safer than it is now. That's the good news. The bad news is all those curves they got rid of in Route 66, all those potholes they got rid of, the average speed of Route 66 will go up 10 or 20 miles an hour. This goes back to talking about this trail. Again, the reason I'm jumping around is these are my guesstimates as when these things will get done. So we now have this bike path that's built there, from Ice Pond to Florence Road. There's a project under construction here called the Oaks. As part of the construction of the Oaks, they gave us a right-of-way for rail trail, or for bike path through their project. Where we're in the middle of a small subdivision, the roads are very minor, we're happy for people, even little kids, to ride in the road. So within the Oaks, we don't need a right-of-way because people can just ride within the road. But we looked at sort of how do we extend that bike path to eventually Maple Ridge subdivision, Florence Road, and Burst Pit Road. And so the Oaks is part of it. We now have a very narrow strip. How do we get from Florence Road up about 200 feet into the Oaks property? And so we're exploring that. There's about 5 or 10 properties which could work for us, but they're all single-family homes and relatively small lots. So, someday someone will want to sell us a narrow strip of the side property. And once that happens, then some of this trail becomes, doable. You can see what we're trying to get is, again, I'm talking about elementary schools. Ryan Road Elementary School is right there. So how do we tie them together? The goal is to get the bike path to Ryan Road Elementary School before Ryan Road Elementary School closes. Even if we don't make that goal, even if Ryan Road Elementary School closes, this right here is the area bounded by Florence Road, Birds Pit Road, and Ryan Road. That's the largest single concentration of people in post-World War II housing in Northampton. So suddenly we get in here, and we've almost instantly made my goal of 80% of the residents. Particularly when you include the other projects we're going through. Again, I guess I jumped ahead, but this is the same thing. So if Oaks is first, Woods Road, and trying to get a link through there is second. This developer who owns all his property is planning to build a subdivision. So one of two scenarios. If the subdivision goes forward, it might be minor streets that are safe for people to ride on. If the subdivision doesn't go forward, we'd love to buy a 20-foot swath through there and build a bike path through there. Okay, the other one is actually one we started on 15 years ago and gave up because the railroad was difficult to deal with. We're dusting it off because, again, the railroad's been much more cooperative. But if anyone knows, from River Run condos up to Hatfield, up to exit 21, there's the active railroad line. And on the east side of the active railroad line, there used to be a trolley, an interurban train that went up there. So this is a wide swath that you look at and say, why does the railroad have all this land? It's because there used to be this other area there. And so we played with, wouldn't that be a great way to start connecting north? Because obviously if you can get, bicycling along North King Street is not my favorite route to bike. But when you get up to exit 21 and you're Hatfield's full of these relatively quiet farm roads. And so then, it's their headache whether there's ever a bike path through there. But if we bring people into Hatfield, there's a great connection on those surface roads that may or may not be the same. So we're beginning to look at it again. We deal with the railroad one project at a time, beginning to think, does this work? Likewise, as I said, the state hospital developer is responsible to bring the bike path from where it's ending in Earl Street into the state hospital project. But we've looked at what would it take to go all the way through the state hospital, put a new bridge across the Mill River, and get to the back side of the high school. So some of the state hospital, it seems so far from the high school, because you have to go all the way through Smith College campus, is suddenly an easy bike ride. You can imagine a high school kid leaving on their bicycle to get to the high school, and they could probably reach the high school on bicycle faster than their parents could drive around it. So great opportunity. We started this project 12 years ago. We got some donations and we got a state grant and did a feasibility study what it would cost to cross the Mill River. And unfortunately, it would cost a lot. It was a very complicated project. Environmental permitting itself is a couple of years. One of the challenges if you go along the river is, again, I'm here 20 years, I say this twice, so maybe it's every 10 years. But every 10 years there's some condition that Bob would probably know as an engineer, where you get these enormous ice blocks. So I go 9 years and you see normal ice, and then you see these ice blocks that feel like I'm in the Hudson River or some huge river somewhere. I don't quite understand what it is. I assume I don't know what it is. But some of these enormous ice blocks that are, can be really damaging to a structure that's there. And so it makes the bridge design more complicated. So as a standalone bridge, we decided it wasn't really feasible, but as part of $1 million bike path, it's totally a feasible project. Again, very complicated. This would require state legislative approval because you're crossing permanent protected open space. We think a bike path in a place which is all the farm roads are now anyway, so you wouldn't lose a single, corn, is compatible with the purpose of the open space. We don't think we're doing a bad thing. We're not stealing parkland, which we never want to do. But it's a very complicated process. You need state legislative approval, you need food and ag approval, you need state legislative approval. You need something called 4F, which basically means you're telling the federal government why there's a feasible route and not harming open space. Open space is protected in lots of good ways. We have to deal with those.
I just wondered if it would be crossing where the Clemens Street Bridge is now or somewhere else.
No, the spot we've looked at it, if you walk So you're gonna keep a secret, not telling terrorists this. But if you walk where everyone walks their dogs there, it's pretty obvious where the Berkshire gas pipeline crosses the river that feeds all of Franklin County, UMass. We do the bridge just downstream from that secret spot in terrorists. That's the most logical spot. We've looked, there's an area, there's a wall a little bit further south, and so there's a sewer line. And it's easier for floodplain issues, but more complicated with the sewer line. So it's a big stand of the river right there. So next project, again, the one that's under construction right now ends at Grove Ave. We've certainly looked at going on to Williamsburg. We're not interested in doing things in other towns. That's Williamsburg's politics. We're interested in going up to the town border at some point. This is probably, of all the ones I'm talking about, the most controversial. Again, people in Leeds love the fact that it's open space. We bought the land last year from the railroad, and there's a lot of support for us buying the land, a lot more opposition for us doing a trail. We've already made a commitment if we do a trail, it's going to be a soft material, trap rock gravel, which is more compatible. We'll see if it ever happens. We're certainly leaving the options open. The most important decision City Council made last year, and that's to buy the land. So it's ours, it's protected forever. We can do it 2 years from now or 50 years from now. We have that option to go at least up to the town line. And you can see, here's the Yard Street Bridge. That's pretty stable condition. That's the main thing we want to pay attention to is making sure that that bridge doesn't fall apart. Designed to hold locomotives, so it's in pretty good shape. So that's it for bike trails. Just very quickly, and I'll stop talking. Trying to do some effort on bike facilities as well. We got a grant from PVTA about 6 or 7 years ago. They gave us 100 bike racks, those big U-shaped racks you see. So they were donated by PVTA from a grant they got. We've used community development block grant money to install them. We've installed about 85 of them. We actually got 103 because we got 3 from some of the towns that didn't use them. One was hit by a truck, so we have 102. So we got 20 left to put in. So that's underway. They're still popping up. We're eventually going to run out of them, but we're getting, pretty good places. Florence, unfortunately, is not eligible for community development block grants. So DPW is looking at where should they go in Florence into the other funding sources that can pay for the installation itself. When we did the Shelton Field Park and Ride lot, we said, we have bikes on buses, but one of the problems with bikes on buses is only racks for 2 bicycles. And so if you get to the bicycle, to the bus, and there's 2 bicycles there, you can't hop on the bus. We have hour headways in buses. So, what does it take to get people to be convinced they can safely ride to the bus and hop on the bus? And so we thought, well, let's try this. We have a federal grant. Let's see if these park and rides for bicycles work, bike lockers. And so we put 8 of them in and have been unable to find more than one person who wants to use them. So far at least it's been a failure. The first 3 years I pointed my finger at the recreation department and said, they're doing a horrible job, they're in charge of that, they don't know what they're doing. And so I said, give it to my office, we'll do a better job. We've now marketed for 1.5 years, we haven't gotten anybody. So recreation did just as bad a job as we did, or just as good a job as we did. So we're trying to figure out, I had an intern last year from Elms College, and her whole internship was trying to get the word out. She did brochures, she put the brochures in the buses, and didn't have takers. So maybe it's an idea that hasn't come. When we designed them, we always knew it was an experiment. They're bolted in. We can move them downtown if we want to do that. Part of me still doesn't want to move them because I like them to work. If anyone's looking for a volunteer project, I'd love to get these to work.
I was down there and I thought this was for the sports equipment that they used on the playing field.
So we're not doing a good enough job.
See anything there about tires?
Yeah. So we do a better job. I will say the decision which I made, maybe it was a bad decision at the time, is when we got the racks, we had 2 choices. We could do quarter racks where it's good for a day, or we could do a key. And I thought, well, they're going to fill up. If you do it for the day, then you're never going to know, are you guaranteed a space? So I said, I'd rather have, let 8 commuters know that absolutely the bike rack will be available. And so I didn't do the quarter thing, I did the key. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe we should have done what you pay for a day. And so we're not trying to make money in these, so the quarter could be you put the quarter in or 50 cents in and it comes back at the end of the day. Right now our system is with a key deposit, it's like $50, but you get it back whenever you're done with it. So there's no charge, and our theory is we're following the same rules as the cars. You park in the park and ride lot for free, so you don't use the bike rack for free. So someone wants to market them, we'd love help. For now, that's our biggest failure. Other failure, a little bit less a failure, but we have, same project, we have $3,500 left. And we said, we have a staircase in the parking garage, it's empty. Can we build a bike room there? And the parking garage people said, well, they're really worried if bicycles go through this glass door, that someone's going to smash the glass door and break it. So we said, great, well, how about city employee parking room? And so they gave it to us, and so we built this bike room. We let all 250 city employees know about it. Only 3 people in the city use it. Unfortunately, all 3 are in my office. So I haven't really felt comfortable with this conflict of interest, lobbying for more expansions of bike facilities downtown. But we loved it. So it still works. We still have the key. I have the key in my key ring somewhere. On nice days, I leave my bicycle outside. On snowy days or rainy days, I bring in the bike room right here. We let the parking garage store tires and junk they have, because only 3 bikes ever get stored there. But we're looking at those sort of efforts. Transportation Parking Commission is playing with efforts now on, can we do employee cash out to encourage employees. I as a city employee get to park free downtown. Can you tell city employees, well, if you give up your parking pass, we give you, ability to park here, we'll give you the PVTA bus pass, or we give you $30 a month, or whatever it is. Again, I'd probably use it, so I haven't been involved because I have a conflict of interest for doing it, but I think it's a good measure to do. The story related to that is we've been pushing Smith College to do that. This year they finally implemented that. And so we're in an odd position where we've been pushing Smith College to do it. Smith College implemented it, but the city still haven't. Micro-Cal Industrial Park has an employee cash-out program. So we have 2 cash-out programs in Northampton, but the city's not one. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that in England we do have probably more CCTV cameras than anywhere else in the world, and we need them. But we do have the program that they've got in France and Paris of renting bicycles and so on. And I think that if you can got places downtown where people can leave their bicycles safely because they're being watched, whoever attempts to steal them or damage them in any way, I think that makes sense, because I know a lot of people would certainly go to their office on a bike, not necessarily school kids, but they would go to an office on a bike if there were bike ramps, rather than these huts.
Yeah.
And I don't even know where the huts are, so I don't know my way around very well. But I think they have to be very convenient for you to use them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love, obviously, we have limited resources. We love other partners to do more of those, but I think that'd be great to do. I think there's lots of opportunities. As more people, it's always the chicken and the egg thing. Which do we do first? Do you do better facilities until people are riding? We focus on the facilities. We focus more on the trails on there, but I think it's a good idea. Yeah, and it's funny, let me talk, it says bike paths, the slide's actually mislabeled. There should be bike lanes. I've been less involved with the bike lane piece. This is more the Department of Public Works. So my office's role. I'm Director of Planning and Development. My office is sort of the developer of these sustainable transportation systems. Once they're done, once they're built, I hand the keys over to DPW, and then they maintain them, and I'm no longer involved, and I can go back to sleep at night. The bike lanes, because they're so integral part of the street, I'm not even involved with the development part. It's more DPW. I know this is an area which has been a sensitive issue. We've gone slower than we would have liked. We applied to Bike League America, or someone can know the name. Bike League, what's it called?
Bicycle Federation of America. League of American Bicycles.
League of American Bicycles, thank you. So we applied to them to be a bike-friendly community. We looked at all the comparable communities in the country, and we said, well, we do better than all these communities, at least all the communities that are silver rating. We think you should approve us. They gave us honorable mention instead of silver because they said they talked to bicycle advocates in Northampton, and they said Northampton's doing a great job of bike paths and a horrible job of bike lanes. We think we get a bum rap, so I'm going to tell you why we think we get a bum rap in this. But certainly there's more we can do. So right now we have 2 official bike lanes, and 1 semi-bike lane, and 1 semi-bike lane, and more underway. So the 2 official ones are the one on South Street, the one from basically almost up to the Mill River to where Old South Street cuts off New South Street. That's right here. That was done with city money a few years ago. Still experimental design. The street's too wide. It's too narrow for parking on both sides and 2 lanes of bikes. but it's too wide for one row of parking, 2 lanes of bikes. So they play with the center islands. It's still sort of in an experimental phase, but that's moving forward. Then the project was originally bankrolled by Smith on Elm Street, and you see the challenge of trying to do things on the cheap. So great thing, but we said we're going to save some money here. The biggest problem with bike lanes is if you want to have curb extensions to make them safer, to make the crosswalk safer, you have to deal with the drainage if you want the water to run down the road. And we said we're going to save money. We're going to have this curb extension with water running behind the curb extension and the main curb. And that works great if it never snows, but oddly enough, it occasionally snows here. And so you get snow buildup and then water floods and you have ice problems and all that sort of stuff. So the Elm Street one basically works well. It's still a work in progress. It's a work in progress for the city side and the engineering, for the community side and educating bicyclists. One of the problems we have both on bike lanes and off bike lanes is people say those cars, those 2-ton cars moving 50 miles an hour are really dangerous. So I'm going to ride on the right side of the bike lane. And there's nothing more dangerous than having a car door that opens and flying over it. I did it when I was 19 in college and ruined my bicycle, and I walked away and it was fine, but you know, it's a horrible experience. And when you look at Elm Street and South Street, particularly Elm Street, there's more parked cars. You see people riding too far to the right. So we have an education challenge as well out there. But that's at least underway. And the 2 other semi-bike paths we have, or bike lanes we have. On Bridge Street coming to town, Mass Highways has been pretty supportive of narrowing the lanes. So you remember Bridge Street used to be 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction. They took out a lane, put in a very wide shoulder. It looks and feels like a bike lane, although there's no fence there, there's no sign there. Likewise at King Street, which isn't highlighted here, there used to be no fog line. There were 2 12-foot lanes in each direction. DPW narrowed them to 11 foot, put in these 2 things that are 2 feet wide. It's not an official bike lane by any stretch of the imagination. Been a disagreement within the city whether we should mark them bike lanes or not. Some people think it's safer to bike on the shoulder, some on the sidewalk. We've ended up not blessing either one. Personally, it's always safer to bike in the bike lane. People should do that, but so it's a semi-bike lane. DPW is very interested in extending from Smith College all the way up to the center of Florence. Some real design challenges, particularly going by the high school, going by Cooley Dickinson. From Smith Folk into Florence, it's really easy. In fact, it would make the road safer because that road is too narrow, too wide for 1 lane each direction, not wide enough. So it's steep, but you know, this, young people can do that. So they're looking. One of the challenges the city has is it takes a fair amount to figure out where these things are, then a fair amount for someone to go out and hand paint the stripes to say where this thing should go, and then you come through with the painting. And the problem is, when we don't have money to paint our roads, we don't want to spend a lot of engineering time putting the bike lane in, and then not be able to keep painting it. Because if you don't keep painting, it's a lot of work to reestablish the lines in the first place. And, you know, we're in a fiscal crisis and have been for a while, and DPW has been incredibly supportive of the lanes, but they say it's a zero-sum game. You know, you have to give us more money for these. You can't say, make this happen without giving us more money. So that's a challenge there. Route 66, same thing as with Mass Highway, it's Route 5, where both cases Mass Highway said, we're okay with narrow travel lanes. We're okay with 11 feet. They're not quite at 10 feet, that some communities in the country have gone to, but we're okay with that, so it's going to have wider shoulders, yeah.
A safety question, the white line on the side of the road, it's solid. Is it against the law for a car driver to go around somebody on the right, somebody stopped turning, and they go over that white line?
Yeah.
And that's a bike lane.
Somebody else should actually answer that, and it's unfortunate because we had a transportation parking commission meeting, the police chief was there, we asked him the answer to that question, but I can't remember the answer. I know it's illegal the way everybody does it, which is, I turn my blinking light on, I live off South Street. I turn my blinking light on half a block before, and the car's already passing me before I even slow down. That's clearly illegal. I think you're allowed to do it if you use, that your responsibility is to yield to the bicycles. If you use full care, or whatever it is, I believe you're allowed to do it, but I'm not 100% sure of that. Yeah.
What happened to that student crossing on Elm Street that's all covered up now, you know, with a push button? Did the plow wreck that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an idea that hasn't quite worked. It's certainly, and Amherst has done a good job of doing it. There's certainly technologies out there. The problem is, you know, we have a winter here, so we have this frost and heaves, and so we have different materials. They move at different speeds, and particularly when we have a very old road. So, you know, if we had a brand new road with lots of gravel, I don't know about engineering. Bob will yell at me. I'm worried I'm talking in front of a really good engineer. And he's going to tell me all the bad things I'm saying. But so in my layman's term, you have a really good road, it moves less. But the problem is it's moved more, water got in, water would freeze, and would cause frosties. So there are technologies, obviously Amherst is doing it, and so we're seeing in a couple years how well it works. I was at a Transportation Parking Commission meeting today, and did a demo on a new product from someone, which is basically very bright LED lights mounted up on the orange sign, yellow sign that says pedestrian crossing. And they just do exactly the same thing, but remove it from the road stuff. So I think that may be a better, and the other thing is actually more visible for further away. And there's a few companies that have these lights up there, different types, flashing lights, you know, and his actually even has a spotlight as well. So there are other technologies that do the same thing. We're experimenting with it. Smith College, I mean this only up to respect, but they have more money than we do, and clearly students getting hurt has really scared them. So they're looking at how do they fund some of these things. So we may see it, if not, we're trying to get it fair in different parts of the city, so we take advantage of where the money is. So we're probably going to see it in front of Smith first, because they're very interested in doing it. The high school is probably second, given the teacher was just hit a few weeks ago. So, you know, we're looking at those options. Technology for some of those is new enough. So in an ideal world, I say this about myself, not about any of you, but you know, as we get older, it's harder to adopt to different things. In an ideal world, we'd have one standard throughout the entire city. Every crosswalk, every light would all be the same. The reality is, for the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to experiment with different materials. And so you can see different things as we see what works and what doesn't. But there's certainly a lot of interest in doing that. The planning board, with city council blessing, has been charging traffic mitigation fees for about 5 years now. So those are beginning to be real money. They're all one-time money for capital improvements. And those are almost all being used for non-traditional things. Traffic calming, and safety, bicycle stuff. And so there's some money there. We got some zoning in the state hospital to encourage infill, encourage people walking in the state hospital. The Commonwealth likes that because all the studies are people drive a lot less, about 35% or 40% less, in those kinds of development patterns. It's the Commonwealth actually a grant program. The mayor's exploring putting a sizable in that grant program into traffic calming as well. So we have some pools of money nowhere near the need that we have out there. And DPW is committed as they rebuild roads. We'll probably use these outside monies to retrofit roads, but as roads get rebuilt, it's not much more expensive to do it right when you rebuild a road. It's really hard to retrofit. So as roads get rebuilt, unfortunately, we have no money to rebuild roads these days. So that's it for my slides. Any other questions, comments?
I have a quick comment about, I ride my bike from Ryan Road down Nonotuck Street into Smith College. And one thing that I noticed, and it kind of bothers me, is that the street sweeping, I mean, it happens weeks and weeks after the last hope of snow. And I'm wondering, and it's a safety concern because sometimes it's like, bicycling on a beach. And I'm wondering if that is ever taken into consideration.
It is, and again, I worry about Bob for everything. Bob was also on the Board of Public Works for 50 years. But generally we have two policies for street sweepings. On major streets, we sweep them regularly and with some frequency, and included places, non-on-top would fit that, and Ryan Road would fit that. On all the other streets, because we're trying to avoid politics and because we don't have money, there's a sequence for wards. So it's wards 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7. The next year 2, and then 1's the last ward. And they rotate. And those streets we're going to do once a year, and we don't get to whoever's the last ward in the sequence, we don't get to until it's about to start snowing again.
So maybe this year our board will see.
And that's frankly about, and we've lobbied, this again, it's not an issue that DBA would have to do with more money. They're not paying overtime, they have, what do they have, 1 or 2 trucks, I don't know. It's an issue both for bicycles, because it's very unsafe, it's also an issue for water quality. We're really tough to the private sector and how they clean up the water quality. one of the easiest ways to protect streams is get that dirt that's full of heavy metals that are down with it cleaned up. So it's really a financial issue. But I will say it's a financial issue, but part of the debate should be if we identify streets that are major bike thoroughfares, not for one person, but major bike thoroughfares, when do those streets move from that ward rotation to the major street rotation? Because the major streets for bicyclists may not be the major streets for cars. They may be looking for parallel streets. Yeah.
Wayne, I was curious about that last comment you made about the traffic mitigation fees.
Yep.
Is that done based on a formula, or is it not regarding specific projects for
Yeah.
specific traffic community for that project?
It's sort of based on a formula. So 5 years ago, City Council gave the authority to planning, right, to the direction of the planning board to charge for incremental traffic. And the idea is, let me go back a little bit. I'll give you quick details, the 2-cent version. But we always, at least for the 20 years I've been here, have charged and have made projects mitigate their impact for big projects. State Hospital, Stop and Shop, those sort of big projects, that actually make a signal drop what's called level of service. So make a signal get a lot worse. We've always done that. But the problem is, so we've mitigated the impact from this big project. The problem is if you build 10 homes, by any stretch of the imagination, you're not going to show up in a traffic study as having any impact on the intersection. But if you each build 10 homes, at some point it's real money, and at some point you build one home, and that one home makes us spend $250,000 on the intersection, and that's not good. So City Council said, we're worried about this, please start paying attention to these incremental impacts, these small impacts. But we don't quite know how to do that. And we always, I said traffic mitigation, I'm not being quite, that was really a shortcut. Technically, in this state, we can't charge impact fees. So technically what happens is, we tell a developer, we'd love you to make bricks and mortar improvements to our streetscape to make it better. And generally big projects do. Stop and Shop put a brand new signal there. If Hillendale Mall gets developed, they put a new signal with a pedestrian cycle there. So, big projects do that kind of things. A big Y, where they just did a rehab, put a signal in on North King Street, and concrete sidewalks in on Cook Avenue. So big projects tend to do that. Smaller projects tend to say, it's hard to build a 20th signal, so they'd like to give us some cash. And so we got this authority 5 years ago. We didn't know the formula. We were experimenting what seemed fair, what covered our costs. We've sort of focused on what we've been doing as a practical matter. I look at the 40 projects that come through, is $2,000 for an afternoon peak rush hour trip. So we don't build roads if you have a job that gets out at midnight, God bless you, we don't have to make any road improvements for you whatsoever. If you get out from 3 to 6 or 4 to 6, we do. And so we decided to charge around this peak afternoon rush hour, and we were charging $2,000 in the outlying areas because we want to encourage people to walk places. If you're at Florence or the edge of Florence or downtown, the edge of downtown, it was $1,000. The actual numbers are, if you're in those areas, you generate on the average 35% less trips. We charge 50% less money because frankly we want to encourage that. We're looking at going back to City Council with a more complicated formula, which might take that even further. If you're downtown, it might be zero mitigation, because we want to get the critical mass to make the buses work better. If I asked you to raise your hands for should we have buses, most of you would raise your hands. If I ask you, do you live in a neighborhood that's 24 dwelling units per acre, which is what it takes to buses to work, most of you aren't going to raise your hands. So how do we get people living in those places to make buses work, so those of us who live in other neighborhoods can take advantage of the buses and a free ride? So we're looking at maybe, instead of 1,000 or 2,000, going from 0 to 4,000 for the afternoon trip based on how much impact we're having on the system. So we're playing with 0 if you're right downtown, 1,000 on neighbors around downtown, 2,000 further out, but on either a bike path or a sidewalk that's continuous from where you are, all the way to downtown or down to Florence, and 4,000 everywhere else. And we're doing council those.
Well, thank you very much. You're going to be around to take That was fantastic as a presentation, and I want to say I've heard Wayne speak a couple of years ago, and I remember thinking, wow, everything's taken care of and everything's been thought of. But what I've learned in the past 2 years is that our trail network needs a lot more support than just Wayne coming up with a 20-year plan. You remember his shameless plug, right? Now, I'm going to be very specific about that shameless plug. There's envelopes in the back of the room. And those envelopes are green. Nick, can you hold one up for us? They are actually opportunities for you to sign up as a member of the Friends of Northampton Trails and Greenways. And I suspect everyone in this room is already a member of the Friends of Northampton Trails and Greenways. And if you're not, you will become a member. But even if you've already made your membership fee, you are more than welcome to contribute again. And also to know that your funds are supporting not just the project that Wayne is talking about, the projects he's talking about, but the maps that we distribute, and the trail cleanups, and many of the other community activities that encourage people to use the trails. So thank you for coming. We will be here. You'll be here to answer more questions, and we'll see you next year. Yes,
How to
Susan?
make a good holiday gift.
That's right. So give memberships to your neighbors and friends.
Thanks again for coming.